Dunniggahassa lahuno, yatthakāmanipātino, Cittassa damatho sadhu, cittaṃ dantaṃ sukhāvahaṃ. Okay, so let's we'll just get right into this. Now we could try to start at the beginning, but really this is a case where it's better if we do locate our actual subject. And the subject of this, first, now these are put on 2 lines. This is kind of like 4 lines put into 2. These first 3 clauses or gatthas have 1 subject, and then this has a different subject. Let's put it that way. So the subject here is damatho, the taming, like the taming of the mind. So we will even write that down, hopefully correctly. The taming of the mind, and we could, that's good, of the mind heart. It's when we see this cittaṃ, we're thinking about both, not just thoughts, not just emotions, the whole complex of moods and emotions, feelings, and our thoughts, our thinking, everything that's going on in our brain. So the taming of that, the taming of the mind heart. Now, strictly speaking, we could go back and pick up this first line, but I'm going to go ahead and complete this, and I think you'll see why. Dear listener, you can let me know if you think this is the best way. The taming of the mind heart is, we'll just say, good. Now, this word here, I should say, I think this comes up, this word comes up quite a bit as an epithet of the Buddha. The Buddha is someone who tames. He tames without weapons. He tames gods and men, you know. He offers this teaching to help us live a dharmic life and find release. So that's one thing I just want to point out before we go on here too far. This sadhu, it means good, profitable, and in Sanskrit, you'll hear this word sadhaka, or sometimes pronounced, maybe Hindi speakers or would say sadhak. And that's a person who is walking the spiritual path. So sometimes you'll hear a sadhak. That's someone who is walking, is engaged in a spiritual practice, attempting to lead that kind of life. I think, strictly speaking, it can be applied to Buddhists and Jains as well as Hindus. I feel like I've heard it more in Hindu context, but that's like the word yogi that gets used by Buddhists as well, even though we might think of it as first and foremost a Hindu term. So the taming of the mind heart is good. Now, and I just wanted to say one other thing. This word sadhu in Thai, sadhu, they use that like we use the word amen. So if you see someone, making merit of some kind, giving food to monks or, even giving food to animals, sadhu, amen. That's very good, very profitable, very meritorious. So the taming of the mind heart is good. And when we do it like this, we would have to say the mind which, that's the only drawback here, but we're getting the meaning. The mind which is, and then we can go back and get this first line. The mind is Dunniggahassa. It is hard to control. The mind which is hard to control. And lahuno means light or quick. So this is light, and it has to do with weight, not light as in we see, which is loco. This means not heavy. And quick, maybe therefore quick. So the mind just can go wherever, it is darting all around. We've kind of encountered that description of the mind already. The mind, which is hard to control, we might just say quick. The mind, which is hard to control, is quick. We could even put that is quick. And then we'll pick up this little, now actually we could just do it like this maybe. Is quick. And now we have this long sort of run together compound. This is a compound. I guess we can take the whole thing as a compound. We'll start at the end here. Nipātino means chancing upon. So now it has another meaning we'll talk about in a minute. So chancing upon, and then kāma. We've all heard of the Kāma Sutra, I think. Chancing upon pleasure. So that's the basic meaning is pleasure. And then more specifically, sense pleasure. I think the Pali English dictionary points out that it can mean our subjective pleasure or the objects that kind of induce that pleasure or that we seek out as pleasurable. And then in an even more restricted sense, it's talking about, sex. It's talking about that very, that one type of sensual pleasure. But it can be extended to any type of sense pleasure. Chancing upon pleasure. And now yattha means where. Chancing upon pleasure where. I think in this case, this is just... I'm not sure how justified. I didn't look up the commentary, so dear listener, if you do, they may have an answer for this or, an approach. Some of the translations I looked at, and I just looked at a couple, it seems to be like chancing upon pleasure wherever, Now, I could be wrong about that. In other words, what we're doing here is we're taking this as a little... we're taking this as a little more indefinite, maybe, where not so much where as in a question, but wherever, chancing upon pleasure wherever, falling upon pleasure. I think I saw alighting upon. That's a fun word to use, which would tie back to lahuno in a way. Now, that is this first part. And now we're getting here, cittaṃ, dantaṃ, sukhāvahaṃ. And this is just, we put these in a different order in English. A mind, a controlled mind, is a bringer of happiness. So we might say the restrained or controlled mind, the tamed, I like tamed, the tamed mind, heart, is a bringer, and it's... I do have that down here, is a bringing, a going to, a causing, is a bringer of happiness, is maybe even the cause of happiness. What about if we say that? Is the cause of happiness. And that is a very, that's a pretty good way to think about it too. Brings happiness, but it's the cause of happiness. The Buddha does not teach us to seek happiness outside of ourselves. And of course, we all know why, because whatever is outside of ourselves is certainly not under our control, and it may just not be available when we want it. And that's going to cause some maybe small amount of suffering, maybe some anxiety, maybe a huge amount of suffering, depending on, if we're addicted to that substance. Like if I don't get caffeine in the morning, I'm going to, my body is going to let me know that it's unhappy about that. And so that is, to be contrasted here when we talk about chancing upon pleasure wherever. The mind is seeking pleasure in all of these places, but the Buddha, as the tamer, is the tamer. He's bringing us this teaching to help us tame our own minds. This word sukha, we generally translate as happiness. Now, it's opposite, and just like here, notice we had this niggahassa prefixed by du, meaning hard or not well, bad, something like that. Su means good. If we have dukkha, then we have this word that has often been translated as suffering. But unfortunately, dukkha does not have a single English word that can carry all of its meanings. I'll just leave that to the side, but sukha is something that we can basically say happiness, kind of a not a bumpy ride, a smooth ride. And if you think back to Dhammapada verse 2, we have this idea of sukhāvahaṃ anveti, and I think it's pasanena, manasa, pasanena. If someone is speaking or acting basati va karoti va with a bright, clear mind, that sukhāvahaṃ anveti, or nang sukhāvahaṃ anveti. Sorry about this, dear listener, but happiness follows that person, And so this is sort of this whole chapter is expanding upon how we can get to that bright and happy mind. Remember, in verse 1 of Dhammapada, it's talking about the spoiled, the padutena, manasa padutena, the spoiled, corrupt, negative mind, which I think is first because I think that's more normal. And the mind isn't usually in a place where we feel always bright and happy and cheerful. But, and that, to get there, it takes work. It takes training. And this is the Buddha's training. It's, he's giving us this path that will lead to happiness. And this is something that we can experiment with ourselves. A friend of mine was saying the other day that he said if you said something and didn't, we were talking about, I'm not even sure exactly, might have been the Four Noble Truths or something, but even something like this, if you just say it and you don't mention Buddha, that this is part of the Buddha's teaching, people just say, yeah, that's true. It just seems true. So it goes beyond, being part of a certain religious or spiritual or philosophical tradition. It seems almost like it's kind of, almost like common sense. But it's common sense that has to be pointed out to us. And just because it's common sense, it does not mean it's easy to tame the mind. Certainly, I've been trying to tame my mind for some time, and it is always... it always finds ways to resist taming. Let's put it like that. So, dear listener, I always value what you have to say. Please let me know if you think I've gotten something terribly wrong here. And with that, peace.